What is up, Broncos fans? The Denver Broncos show back here again to do another video. In this video, I wanted to give my thoughts on the news that came out yesterday regarding the Broncos and head coach John Fox mutually agreeing to part ways. In a nutshell, it's basically the nice way of saying we fired John Fox. And just kind of give my take on that, kind of give my take on what John Fox did over his 4 seasons here in Denver, and then also look at some of the coaching candidates I would like to see the Broncos target in the next coming weeks during their head coaching search. Looking at John Fox and looking at what he did over his 4 seasons here in Denver, first and foremost, I just want to thank John Fox for not only being a class act during his time as the head coach of the Denver Broncos, but everything he did for this team. We had a lot of success under John Fox, and I hope a lot of people, even though we had a ton of misfortune underneath John Fox in the playoffs, we had a lot of success with him nonetheless, and I hope people don't disregard what he did for this organization, because John Fox came into this organization 4 years ago when we were in a really bad spot. We had just finished a 4-12 season. We had the 2nd pick in the draft. We had Tim Tebow and Kyle Orton at quarterback. We just fired that moron Josh McDaniels. Eric Stoodsville was our interim coach for the last 3 games or some shit like that. And then we've been John Fox, and right out the gate, he just restored credibility, restored stability, and the winning culture to this organization. And I hope people don't overlook that because of his playoff misfortunes or him not being successful in the playoffs with our team, because he did a lot for this organization. And I just want to thank John Fox for everything he did for this team, everything he did for this city. Again, he was a class act. He was a player's coach. All the players spoke very highly of him. John Elway spoke very highly of him. Great guy off the field, and again, a phenomenal coach, and he's not going to be out of work for a long time. I mean, this is a guy that took Jake Dell home to a Super Bowl, okay? He was very successful in his 4 seasons here, and there's already reports that the Bears are interested in him, the Jets are interested in him. John Fox is not going to have a hard time finding work, and for whatever team gets him, you're getting a great human being, and more importantly, a very sound football coach who, in those two organizations really need to restore some stability. John Fox would be a great fit for the Jets or the Bears, and again, he's a phenomenal football coach, had a lot of success here, and I just thank John Fox for everything he did for this organization. I wish the best of luck to him and his family. Denver really appreciates what he did here. And again, we were very successful over those 4 seasons. You look at what we did in the regular season with John Fox. In those 4 years, we were 46-18 in the regular season. We had 2 13-win seasons under John Fox. You won 4 consecutive AFC West Division titles under him. You won an AFC Conference Championship. He had a Super Bowl appearance, and again, John Fox came in at a really murky time and helped kind of restore the winning culture here in this franchise, got us back to the Super Bowl, restored that credibility to the Broncos organization that it kind of lost after Mike Shanahan left and we brought McIdiot in here for 2 seasons. So you got to give John Fox a lot of credit in that regard. And again, this was a guy that was a player's coach. He was very well liked within the organization, very well liked by his players, and again, has had a lot of success, and we got a lot accomplished in his 4 seasons here. But the biggest problem with John Fox, and a lot of people will say it, is obviously his team's ability to compete and play to the standard they played in the regular season. In the playoffs, obviously, he was 46-18 in the regular season. That's great, but in the playoffs under John Fox, we were only 3-4, and that probably was a huge reason why he was let go. We lost 2 playoff games at home as well under John Fox, and that's just not acceptable. Those 4 consecutive division titles are great. The 46 wins in the regular season over 4 years is great. The Super Bowl appearance is great. The conference championship is great. But at the end of the day, the ultimate goal is to win that Lombardi Trophy and win a world championship, and we just cannot get that job done under John Fox. Again, 3-4 playoff record in 4 seasons with Fox. And you look at how badly we lost in the playoffs under John Fox, it just really isn't acceptable. And those 2 playoff home losses that we had under John Fox, of course, to Indianapolis this past weekend and Baltimore a few years ago, in those 2 games, we were outscored 62-48. So to get outscored at home in the playoffs, 62-48 to 2 teams that you were better than at the time, just not acceptable. And again, that falls on the coach. And in all 4 of John Fox's playoff losses, you look at the 4 games we lost in the playoffs under Fox, 2 Indianapolis, of course, 2 Baltimore, 2 New England, and 2 Seattle in Super Bowl 48. In those 4 games, those 4 postseason losses under John Fox, the Broncos were outscored a combined 150 to 66 by those 4 teams in those 4 playoff losses and 4 playoff games. That is just mind-boggling. Again, outscored in those 4 playoff losses under John Fox, 150 to 66. That is a dominant margin, a huge margin, and again, that's just unacceptable. The regular season success is great, the division titles are great, the Super Bowl appearance is great, but bottom line, you're 3-4 in the playoffs, and you're getting destroyed in the playoffs, and in those 4 losses, you got dominated. And the thing about John Fox that really bothered me throughout his 4 seasons is I felt he was really stubborn at times. He's really kind of set in his ways. He was really defensive-minded coach. We got to run the ball, run the ball, run the ball. He was very conservative. He was a very conservative play caller. You can point to a multiple number of situations throughout his 4 seasons here in Denver where he was just way too conservative. In particular, I remember in that loss to Baltimore in the playoffs a few years back, they had just tied the game on that Joe Flacco Hail Mary to Jacoby Jones. There was like 27 seconds left in the game. We had a timeout left. We had just gotten the ball back around the 20-yard line. You got Peyton Manning, his first year at home, and you choose to kneel instead of, trying to win the game, trying to get into field goal position. You also had Matt Prater at the time, had a huge leg kicking here in the thin air in Denver, and you choose to kneel with a timeout and 27 seconds left, and you got Peyton Manning and Matt Prater. I mean, just way too conservative. Of course, we chose to go to overtime in that game, and the rest is history. We lost. And again, it seemed in the playoffs that our teams just weren't prepared as well. The mental toughness of this team just was awful. In the playoffs. Again, you get outscored in your 4 playoff losses under Fox by a margin of 150 to 66. That's on the coach. You got to get some out of your players. And that's the thing about John Fox is he was a player's coach, but he really never showed any fire. He never showed emotion or passion. I know he was a high-energy guy, and he brought some energy to this organization when he came in, but he wasn't fiery enough to win a Super Bowl, in my opinion. And he wasn't fiery enough to get the best out of his players, particularly on this team. And yes, he was a player's coach, but you just look at what we did in the playoffs under him, and the fact that we just got our ass kicked, and the fact that we got dominated in those 4 playoff losses, that's on the coach, man. And that's on, not preparing your players enough, not having your players mentally ready enough, and your team wasn't mentally tough enough. Your team was mental midgets in those big games. And that's, I think, ultimately what John Fox will be remembered, unfortunately, for in Denver, and ultimately will lead to his downfall and firing, is his team literally crumbled and panicked and just shut down in the biggest games and at the biggest times possible. And that's really, in a nutshell, John Fox's Broncos career. Again, I hope he's not remembered for that, and I hope he's, I hope people realize the amount of success that we accomplished underneath him. But this is a guy that, for all the division titles and the regular season wins and the conference championship and all the things he's done here and the great things he's done here, he will be known as the coach that can never, get us past that big game. He got us to the big game, and then we lost 43-8. So, in a nutshell, I think John Fox was definitely let go for his lack of coaching and lack of ability to get the best and most out of his player, emotion out of his player as well, players in the biggest games. And ultimately, that's why he was fired. But again, I thank him for everything he did for this organization. Best of luck for him and his family going forward. And he won't be out of work for long, as I mentioned earlier. But when you go 3-4 in the playoffs, and you lose those 4 games by a combined score of 150 to 66, this was just the inevitable. I mean, that's just pathetic, and your teams just got dominated in the postseason under John Fox. Now, looking at some of the coaching candidates that I would like to see the Broncos target to replace John Fox. Excuse me. First and foremost, I think you got to start with Gary Kubiak. Obviously, his name has been already tossed around as a potential candidate for the Broncos to pursue for their head coaching vacancy. And I think he'd be a great choice. I think he might be the ideal choice. Already, of course, has head coaching experience under the Houston Texans, was there for several seasons. During his time with the Texans, he compiled a regular season record of 61 wins and 64 losses. He led them to 2 AFC South division titles, and he had a record of 2-2 in the playoffs with Houston as their head coach. So he already had some pretty moderate success as a head coach. You like that. And of course, he has a ton of personal ties, not only to John Elway, but to this organization and to this city. Of course, with John Elway's backup from 1983 to 1991, so about an 8-year span, and then was, of course, the offensive coordinator for us under Mike Shanahan. Also was a quarterback coach here for a decade. Won those 2 Super Bowls in the late 90s with this organization, again, as the offensive coordinator under Mike Shanahan. So he has those personal ties to Elway. He has those personal ties to this organization, being a part of those 2 world championships that we won, and he knows how much the city wants to win a world championship. He knows how much John Elway wants to win a championship, and I think that's why he'd be a good fit here. He knows kind of the ins and outs of not only Elway, but this city and this organization and this team, having not only been a player for this team, but also being a coach, a quarterback coach, and then, of course, offensive coordinator under Shanahan for those 2 Super Bowl championships. He knows what it takes to win, and I think those personal ties with the city and Elway would make him a great fit here in Denver. Currently, of course, he is the Baltimore Ravens offensive coordinator, did some great things this season with that group, and Joe Flacco and Justin Forsett, Steve Smith under John Harbaugh there in Baltimore did some great things with that offensive unit. And he did say over the weekend that he wasn't going to leave Baltimore, and he didn't think he was going to take a head coaching interview or position, anything like that. But now with our coaching position opening up, and now that we have a head coaching vacancy to fill, I think Kubiak, maybe we can entice him again with his personal relationship with Elway. And I think he'd be a great fit in Denver because he knows the culture here. He knows how much this team means to the city. He knows how much these fans, how much Elway want to win a world championship, and he has that personal connection to not only the organization but to John Elway as well. Next coach I'd like to see the Broncos interview or target is Dan Quinn. Of course, is the Seattle Seahawks current defensive coordinator, been their defensive coordinator for the past 2 seasons, and is a guy that's name's already been thrown out there as someone that the Broncos want to interview. This guy's a great coach. I think he would really add some toughness, definitely some mental toughness to this team, which has obviously been lacking under John Fox, primarily, as I just mentioned earlier, in the playoffs. He was a former defensive lineman. He's been a defensive line coach for several teams in the NFL, not only for Seattle, but also for San Francisco, Miami, and the New York Jets. He was also the defensive coordinator and defensive line coach for the Florida Gators, I think, for a season or 2. And then, of course, has been the defensive coordinator for the Seahawks for the past 2 seasons, helped lead that defense last year to a Super Bowl victory, and now has them in prime position to repeat. Of course, they have a NFC title game this weekend against Green Bay. And again, I like the fire that this guy coaches with. Again, I think he would bring some toughness to our team, some mental toughness, most importantly. And he's a former defensive lineman and a former defensive line coach. I think that'd be a great fit for our team. Our defensive line has kind of been a shaky part of our team for the past several seasons. I think he'd be a great fit in terms of developing some young players across that defensive front, like Malik Jackson, Derek Wolfe. I think he'd be a great coach for those guys, get the most out of them. And obviously, he's done a great job at developing the players in Seattle on that defensive side of the football, and also has done a great job of getting the most out of his players, which is something John Fox did not do. He's obviously done a great job of motivating his players. He's fiery, and I think that's the type of guy we need to help us get to that next step in winning a world championship. So Dan Quinn, Seattle's defensive coordinator, another guy I'd like to see the Broncos look at. Probably not a name most people are talking about, but a guy I think that would be a phenomenal fit here in Denver is Pep Hamilton, who ironically is the offensive coordinator of the team that just beat us, the Indianapolis Colts. I think he's one of the most underrated coaches probably in football today, and I think he's one of the most underappreciated offensive minds. He's done some great things for the Colts now in his 2nd season as the offensive coordinator for them, and again is a phenomenal offensive mind, very good play caller as well. And he's a former quarterback, was a quarterback for Howard University in the early to mid-90s. He was also a quarterback and receivers coach at Stanford before ultimately becoming the offensive coordinator there at Stanford, and was Andrew Luck's offensive coordinator and quarterback coach in college there, I think, for Andrew Luck's last season. And again, has also worked with Andrew Luck for the past 2 years in Indianapolis, and he's done some great things for that offense. You look at what he's done as the offensive coordinator for Indianapolis over the past two seasons. The Colts are 3-1 in the playoffs with Pep Hamilton as their offensive coordinator, and of course they could go to 4-1 if they beat the Patriots this weekend in the AFC title game. And he's brought a lot of improvement to that team. And in his first year as the offensive coordinator in Indianapolis, they were the 15th ranked total offense. This year, in his 2nd season, they were the 3rd ranked total offense. So obviously this team has steadily improved underneath Pep Hamilton. And again, he's a very creative play caller. I think Andrew Luck's rookie season in 2012, when their offensive coordinator was Clyde Christensen, Andrew Luck had 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. He only had a 54% completion rate. He had a QBR rating of 65.2, and he threw for 4,374 yards. In 2 seasons under Pep Hamilton, he's thrown 63 touchdowns, only 25 interceptions. His completion percentage has gone way up to 61%. His QBR is about the same, 62.9, and he's thrown for 8,583. And again, this is a guy I think is a very underrated coach. I think he'd be a great fit here, especially offensively. I love his aggressiveness. I love love his creativeness as a play caller, and I think he's a phenomenal offensive mind and would really be a great fit in Denver. Of course, the two coaches that are in-house that everyone's talking about is our defensive coordinator, Jack Del Rio, and our offensive coordinator, Adam Gase. Personally, I don't want either one of those guys as our head coach. I think Adam Gase has a ton of potential. Jack Del Rio obviously already coached in Jacksonville, had some success there, but I think Jack Del Rio is a pretty mediocre head coach, honestly. He's a fiery guy. He gets a lot of his players. I like that about him, but I don't want him as our head coach. He's kind of been there, done that. And then Adam Gase, I think, is got a ton of potential, but with his play calling over the past 2 seasons, primarily this season, I don't want him back. I think it's best to kind of start fresh, and both those guys are probably going to be head coaches somewhere else anyway. Adam Gase is closing in on becoming the 49ers coach, and Jack Del Rio is closed in on becoming the next head coach for the Raiders. So those are two guys a lot of people keep bringing up, but honestly, I really don't want to see Del Rio or Adam Gase as the 15th head coach of the Denver Broncos. So that's my video, guys. Leave me a comment below. What do you think of the Broncos' decision to get rid of John Fox? I think ultimately John Elway made the right decision here. Leave me a comment. What do you think about that? And leave me some coaching candidates that you'd like to see the Broncos interview and target to fill that head coach vacancy now. And who would you like to see become the 15th coach of the Denver Broncos organization? Would love to hear your guys' thoughts. As always, leave me a comment below. Thank you for watching. And as always, guys, go Broncos. Look forward to seeing who's going to be our new head coach.